up is 42. There's been 10 games in the NFL, so I decided I would compare those 10 games that have been played to what's out there right now in Madden 18. And to do that, I said what would look nice is one of those pairwise charts. I thought that what it was. I thought it was a pairwise chart. Actually, this is an XY axis chart, I think it's called. So I did this in Excel. I didn't know how to put the pictures on until later on, or else I'd have put them in automatically. I had to copy and paste them from NFL, but that was pretty easy. And then when you see the ones that are in the boxes, those are the ones that have the same access point. I'm explaining this chart. I'm trying to make it simple, but one thing that kind of throws you off is you got a zero. You got two zeros in the bottom left. That's supposed to be zero, but it's easier to understand this chart if you look at it, the one at the bottom as being 1 through 32 in order of what teams are the best. With number 1 being the best. And then number 2, that's like the Browns, okay? And then the way the chart works going from the bottom to the top is winning percentages. So if you won half your games, that's 50. If you won all your games, that's 100. Ain't none of the teams won all their games, but you got the Eagles at 90. And then you got some teams over at the 80s. The Falcons and the Seahawks, they hadn't played their game because this was before Monday night. So they hadn't played 10 games, so they were kind of stuck in between. Now they played them. The Seahawks should be at the 60, and so should the Falcons. They should both be at the 60 because the Falcons won. If you aren't too far to the left, that means your ratings isn't that good. If the further to the right you are, that's the worse your rating is in Madden. The higher up you are, that's how good you are in real life. That's your winning percentage. That's how it works. So the underrated teams, they're going to be up high, but they're going to be to the right. The overrated teams, they're going to be down low because they ain't winning, but they're going to have decent Madden ratings, so they're going to be over to the left. That's just how it is. That's how it works. Now, I'm looking at it. I said, well, what's the top 5 teams and why are they like that? Who's the top 5 overrated in Madden? Who's the top 5 underrated? We're going to start with overrated first. Now, number 1, not going to start with number 1. I'm going to go a countdown. We're going to start with the 5th most overrated team in Madden. I'm saying it's the Cowboys. They won half their games. That's 50%. They got an 88 rating. That plots them in the top 10. I think they're around the 7th rated team or something like that. Bills are rated even higher than them. They got an 88 rating, and they had 502, only won half their games. This may change, but for now, right now, after every team has played 10 games, the Bills are at 88. That's awfully high for a team that's only won half their games. Matter of fact, they're the highest rated 500 team. After the Bills, number 3, I got the Texans. They got an 86 rating. And that's the highest rated under 500 team. And you can see it on the chart. Ain't no team higher that's won less than half their games. They're only number 3. Number 2, the Seahawks. The Seahawks are now 6-4. I did this before I was watching the game. I saw them lose. They lost. So they are at 60. They the highest rated team at 6-4. They got a 90. It's a close race. I still am not giving it to the Seahawks. If you look down, if you look at the chart, you can see who's left. It's not the Chiefs. The Chiefs are kind of overrated, but it's got to be those Broncos. The Broncos, they've won 3 games out of 10, and they got an above average rating. They're rated, I'm not sure where they are. I could look it up, but anyhow, they're rated in the top half. You know what I'm saying? They're rated in the top half. You can look at the chart and you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's only 12 teams ahead of them. Because the Ravens, they're rated equal. They line to line with the Ravens. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 12 teams ahead of them. They're in the top 50%, and they've only won 3 out of 10 games. Number 1 most overrated team in Madden, the Denver Broncos. Underrated. Coming in at number 5, I am saying it's the Saints. Now, you might think the Saints are not that far in the underrated category. There's some other teams. What about, okay, we're only at number 5. But the Saints are 8-2. And they are ranked like right there. I think they're maybe 1 ahead of the Cowboys, or they're equal to the Cowboys. They won 80% of their games. They got an 87 rating. Worse than all them other teams. Worse than the Bills. Worse than the Chiefs. Worse than the Jaguars. All these teams that have won less. Worse than the Seahawks. At number 4, it's the Steelers. Steelers are pretty much in the same boat. They got an 86 rating, so they even more underrated than the Saints. Number 3, we're gonna go to a losing team. Cardinals. They won 4 out of 6. Now you think 4 out of 6? Well, they won't be rated that high, but shit, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be at. They basically rated second to last, because you got the Browns are the worst rated team. Then the Cardinals and the 49ers are rated second to last. They tied for second to last. They got a low 77 rating. They got more wins than all these teams below them. They got more wins than the Broncos. Broncos won 3. Broncos is 84. They won 4. They 77. They got more wins than the Broncos, the Colts, the Giants. All these teams that are level with them, they got more wins than the same amount of wins, I should say, as these teams that are level. All these teams that are level, and you got the Cardinals way back with a 77 rating. It's hard to get a 77 rating because it's a salary cap. Everybody got to pay their guys the same amount. So when you rate it under the 70s, your drafting skills are going to get you a general manager, may get them fired. And you build a team like that. Shit, I can build a much better team like that in franchise mode. That's just awful. I would deserve to get fired if I had a team that was rated 77 like that. But they still won 4 games, so I'm calling them the 3rd most underrated. 2nd most underrated, I'm going to give that to the Tennessee Titans. Because they 6-4. They got a winning record. They got the worst rating of any team with the winning record. You can look at the chart and see that, because they got the same they got the same rating as the Raiders. Raiders are 4-6. They 6-4. They done beat the Seahawks. They beat the Jaguars. They've gotten their butts kicked by some good teams, like when the Texans were healthy, and going into Pittsburgh, they muscled out a winning record. They 6-4, and they got the worst rating of any team with the winning record. So I got them at number 2. But they not number 1. Number 1, I got to give that to the Carolina Panthers. They 7-3 with an with an 82 overall rating. Suckers Broncos, they 84 with a 3-7 rating. That's a team that's won 7 out of 10 games, and all them other teams are rated higher than the Panthers. So,
break. Okay, reset, rewind. To take a quick break. Now I'm going to just go through quickly the teams that are underrated and overrated and take a look at why. So starting with the Cowboys, I don't really have that much on the Cowboys. I have a lot more on other teams. With the Cowboys, I think it's basically Dez Bryant with a 90 overall. That just doesn't look right compared to other people. I think Tyrone Smith's 87. Tyrone Smith, that might be questionable. I'll let fans of the teams tell it. And I know overall ratings and team ratings, they're not as indicative as individual ratings. I mean, I don't really have the desire to break down each player by individual ratings, because sometimes individual ratings, or really all the time, individual ratings matter more than whatever it calculates overall or whatever it calculates to. So I just want to throw that in there. This is just a rough look at it. I think basically all their cornerbacks are overrated. I think their receivers are overrated, especially Dez Bryant in comparison to other players. I'm also looking at their Pro Football Focus just as a scale. I know that's not everything. To really see what's going on with the player, you got to look at them play. And I haven't scouted all of these teams that tightly. So I'm tossing this out to the fans to see what they think about it, the fans of each team. So I'll put this on team blogs for the top 5 teams. And if anybody wants to chime in and say, hey, I think this team is rated correctly, because I see something interesting with the Texans that I'll get to. I basically, with the Cowboys, I think their corners suck, except for Jordan Lewis, who's decent as a rookie. The ratings don't necessarily affect that. A lot of times, cornerbacks are overrated. But moving on with the Bills, Benjamin at 86, too many injuries. They have Cody Glenn. That's a heck of a markup. The number on the right is their Pro Football Focus rating. As you can see, like with Cody Glenn, John Miller, some marking up from the Pro Football Focus rating, you have to do it because it's based on a scale. And guys really aren't that bad, but going from a 39 to a 75. Jeffrey Hughes having an 88 when he has 3 sacks so far. That's not a terrible amount of productivity. Lorenzo Alexander, they look overrated. Preston Brown. Now, Tanner Vallejo, that's at 62, that's sort of a trend that I wanted to just touch on quickly. A lot of times when guys are elevated from the practice squad, their ratings, or even just third-string guys that are there for a reason. They're there because they can play. 62, that's not the type of rating that should garner a guy getting moved into minutes. He's, Tanner Vallejo, from what I understand, I could be wrong, Bills fans, that he's looking at getting some minutes. So I think he's underrated, but I see a bunch of other players throughout the roster, namely those guys that are overrated. So it sort of makes sense with them. With the Texans, I don't really see them as being an overrated team. Hopkins at 92, Fuller at 81. I didn't include their football focus ratings, but really, when it comes to wide receivers, the main stat I care about is touchdowns. Can you get the ball in the end zone? Are you fast enough to break away and get in the end zone? Or are they going to you in the red zone and you're getting touchdowns there? I think Hopkins has like 8 touchdowns or 9 touchdowns. Fuller has 7 and hasn't even played every game. That's extremely productive. They're a pain. And their O-line, I can't say they're overrated because their O-line is just poor ratings across the board. Now, it could be that their individual ratings are better than what I'm seeing in the overall. I didn't go through that. It looked like Reeder and Clowney were underrated, if anything. The only area where I thought they might be overrated is their corners, with both the KJs, I forget their names, are 76 and 74, and really they aren't even producing at that level. And Andre Hall might be overrated too. But for the most part, I think the Texans are okay. It's just that other teams are throwing off the scale. So even after all their injuries, they appear to be, looking at the chart, they appear to be more overrated than they are. And when I go to the Seahawks, you can't have Rawls at 79. He's just not producing like that. And if Rawls is a 79, their offensive line has to be terrible. Baldwin at an 89, I think he has 3 touchdowns, unless he scored in the last game. And this team, because when I did this, it was right before Monday night. They're 6-4. You know what I mean? So Luke Wilson at 80, that's kind of high. Graham at 89 with a Football Focus rating of 72. Their safeties, both having Hall of Fame in their prime ratings of 97. I think their Football Focus ratings are in the 80s. I'm not seeing that. That jumps out as being overrated. I think KJ Wright is like the one player on their defense that's underrated. Maxwell at 77 when he just basically signed with the team. Their corners are like Dallas. I'd say their corners are a little bit overrated too. And that's one of the reasons why they give up points. I'm not sure how Cam Chancellor is still in the game. I don't know when they're going to take him out the game and how injured he is, but both of them with 97. That, to me, a 97 is the type of rating you only get when you are producing at a high level right now. They're producing at a high level, but they're not producing at an all-time Hall of Fame high level right now. So that's one, because this is a team that's 6-4 with a 90 rating in Madden. So those are the things that step out. There might be some more. Again, people can chime in. The Broncos, I consider them to be the most overrated team. If you look at the receivers, Thomas and Sanders, 87, 89. You can see their Football Focus numbers. Virgil Green at 76 seems high. All of these guys, Talib, their corners, to me, were overrated as soon as the game launched, and people looked at that and said, what's up with the Broncos DBs? They're good in real life, but this looks a little exaggerated, and that's what you have. That's why this team is 3-7 with an 84 rating. Basically, with that rating, they're definitely top 15. I always have to go back to the chart, but I'm gonna go this time. I'll keep going. Oh, I guess I do have to go back to the chart. Yeah, they're more than a top 15 team based on this chart. At 3-7, most overrated team in Madden. The Saints, looking at why they're underrated, I have them as the 5th most underrated team. If Ingram is an 85, well, I should say if Rawls is a 79, Ingram can't be an 85. Michael Thomas, he should be, you would figure he'd be rated higher than the Broncos receivers. Kamara, their backup running back, who's a rookie, he's been incredibly productive. I think that 83 is low for him because he has such a high average. He's rushed for 459 yards. Their O-line has a couple players in Warford and Ramczak. I mean, if you're running the ball like that with Ingram and Kamara, also Kamara catches a bunch of passes. If anything, the O-line should have numbers that are inflated more from their Pro Football Focus rating, but I'm not seeing that. That's one of the reasons I have the Saints as top 4 underrated. Hendrickson's very productive, and his rating is, I think, I can't really see it. I zoomed it out. Okafor, you can see they're productive. They're not stretched out from that Pro Football Focus rating. A lot of times it's lower. Their Madden rating is lower than their Pro Football Focus rating. Latimer is an example of that. The way Latimer's playing, I don't care if he's a rookie. I think that 88 is low. You can't throw the ball his way. There was a meme recently saying you're better off throwing the ball into the ground. And then Crawley, I'm seeing quite a few players whose Madden ratings are lower than their Pro Football Focus rating, and that's not the norm. That's not typical. And that's one of the reasons, to me, from what I'm seeing, that they are top 5 underrated. The Steelers, I think Bell at 93, when he's averaging less than 4 yards, is a little overrated, even though he can do everything. and their O-line isn't highly rated. I think their O-line is slightly overrated with the exception of the Castro and Gilbert. But again, I've watched them sometimes. And, in watching them, I would say Martavius Bryant is a little overrated, but Juju Smith-Schuster should be rated higher. With him, it's not just that they gave him a low speed score and had to fix that. He runs a good route. And he's got some size. He can catch the ball with people on him. Jesse James is somewhat productive, but a lousy Pro Football Focus rating. I'd have to watch him play to see what that's about. But where I do see that the Steelers are very underrated is in the interior. And just looking at those numbers with Tuitt, Hargrave, even Shazier, an 88's a terrific rating. He kicks ass in Madden. I think he should probably kick more ass. If he's leading the team in tackles and interceptions, that's a big thing. When you can't throw up the middle, you can't run up the middle because you got this maniac that's breaking everything up. Vince Williams, and on the outside, Sensabaugh, considering he's a real third-string guy, his Football Focus rating is low sample size, but I still think Sensabaugh is somewhat underrated. The Cardinals, I have them as the third most underrated team, and there's quite a few things. Really, the Cardinals are one of those teams that are probably overachieving, and they're going to have a lower Madden rating. They've got some issues. As a matter of fact, I think they're overrated in some areas, especially on offense. They were sacked. Looking at how often Palmer was sacked. I think Frosty Rucker's underrated. You can make a case for Xavier Williams. Is that right? 71, 81? That's strange. Yeah, I think he needs an update, or at least they need to look at him and see why there's that discrepancy. There could be a good reason for it. So I haven't. If I looked at it, I could probably find that there isn't, but I haven't. You can see some of the players. I think Peterson's 91, even though he doesn't have a high Pro Football Focus rating, it's somewhat off reputation. I think it's deserved because they're not throwing at him. Matter of fact, I'd say Tramon Williams is one of the exceptions where he's underrated. Their other corner is underrated. A 76, considering how often they throw at him. He has more tackles than Peterson. He has a high Football Focus rating. They're one of the few teams where I think their corners are underrated, especially like Peterson. If Peterson is a 91, then what corners are going to be that much better than him? They're just not throwing it at him. They're not. So I do see some areas where they're underrated on defense. Matter of fact, that seems to be the trend, is defense doesn't get the ratings like offense does. With some exceptions. The Titans, I'm going to have to blow this up and pause it. Because I wanted to mention one thing. One of the reasons the Titans are underrated is they have a long snapper who's a 51 rated tight end. There's no long snap rating, so that's basically just a wasted player who brings down their rating when there needs to be a long snap rating. Otherwise, why keep a long snapper? Especially one that can't do anything but long snap. I think Murray might be a little overrated as a runner with an 82. Henry as an 81 is probably underrated as a runner. Decker, overrated at this time. Davis, not really the Pro Football Focus rating as a receiver, but low sample size. I think Walker's overrated at 94. But I am seeing why this team's underrated. Ben Jones should probably be higher. I don't think Ben Jones is a great player by any means, but a 78 with the way they've ran the ball decently, and he's pretty good stopping pass protecting. Other than that, I think their O-line is okay rated. Daquan Jones, I think he's underrated. Austin Johnson, slightly underrated. Casey, he's playing good football. He's borderline underrated. Sylvester Williams, I think, is a little underrated with a 72. Derek Morgan, kind of a low Pro Football Focus rating, but he has 6 sacks. Woodyard, you might want to take a look at Woodyard because he's coming on. He's playing big time. Williamson, I think, is underrated, and Woodyard's better than him. So that, if you look at somebody like Brandon Marshall, Williamson's playing at least how Pro Football Focus. It's a big discrepancy between somebody like Brandon Marshall and Williamson. Jayon Brown is a little low. Arakpo, Walden, their defense is generally underrated, especially at corner, where Adoree Jackson's played good football in the last half of the season. Logan Ryan's been solid. Sims has been pretty good. The only corner that's in the rotation that's overrated is McCain, and that's been true for a little while. You could even argue that Byard with a 91 is underrated because he has an 89 Pro Football Focus rating. He has 6 picks, and he's playing next to a rookie. And Cyprian might be overrated, but it's low sample size with him. He's had injury issues. And then you have the most underrated team in Madden, the Panthers. Second in yards allowed, and I see it like other teams, I see it mostly on their defense. Christian McCaffrey in 81. He's not really running the ball. Matter of fact, I'd even say Jonathan Stewart is overrated. But Christian McCaffrey does so many other things. I think that 81's a little low. Now, there could be more to it, but again, running backs are supposed to run the ball. How I haven't watched the Panthers enough to know if they're putting them out at wide receiver. That's another issue if I go back to the Titans, which I won't. But Adoree Jackson plays offense in real life, but you can't do that in Madden. I don't know if you can really put McCaffrey at receiver and move him around like the Panthers should, considering he's a better receiver than the running back, and a lot of that's on their O-line. Where they're underrated, like a lot of teams, is on defense. And you can see some of the players, Darrell Williams, Julius Peppers in 81, but I mean with 75 sacks, 7.5 sacks, Quan Short, 4 sacks. You have guys across the board on their defense, with the exception of their corners. Their corners really are a rough squad. They deserve low ratings until they prove otherwise. But outside of their corners, man for man, and I just noted some of the players, I think they're underrated. Specifically against the run, but just their defense. Kuechly has a hell of a rating, though. But other than that, their defense doesn't get enough cred. It's really difficult to run the ball against them. And then, even though their corners are weak, they have a heck of a pass rush. And that probably isn't translated if this team is only rated 82 in Madden, even though they have a 7-3 record. I say the Carolina Panthers. Not a Panther fan. Most underrated team in Madden. Broncos, most overrated. Interesting, considering these teams were in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So maybe that has something to do with it. So that's it. I'm going to do the same thing for NBA 2K, maybe in a week or so after the NBA's played 20 games, and see how that goes. So if you're interested, subscribe to this channel. Have a good night. Interesting, considering these teams were in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So maybe that has something to do with it. So that's it. I'm going to do the same thing for NBA 2K, maybe in a week or so after the NBA's played 20 games, and see how that goes. So if you're interested,